Okay. Now this is our our eligibility meeting for Forrest Gump.
Okay, welcome. Mrs. Gump, we're here today for the eligibility of your son, Forrest. First, we'd like to make some introductions. I am Corey Harris, and I am the Special Ed Administrator, and I will run the meeting.
I am Theresa Dougherty, and I am Forrest's mother.
I am Cindy Kneemiller, and I am going to go over the psychologist report. I'm the LEA rep.
And I'm Balestino. I'm the Gen Ed teacher for the meeting.
Okay, first what we'd like to do is, we've already had the review of records meeting. We ordered a comprehensive assessment by the psychologist, but we'd like to get some information from you, Ms. Dougherty, about your son and how you see him in the educational setting.
Okay, well, I should probably start by telling you that we actually came from Greenbow, Alabama, so we are not from here originally, and I am a single parent. So Forrest does not have any contact with his father. In fact, I don't even know who his father is, so, you know, it's kind of like that at home. So Forrest is, he's always been a bright boy. He always got really great progress reports when we were in Alabama. He always appeared to, on the progress reports, meet his goals and objectives, but I don't personally think he actually met any of those. He did have scoliosis, so he did have some braces on his legs, which recently have come off, and we think he's just gonna, I mean, he's a good little runner. So he's just a fast little thing. So we think maybe he's gonna join the track team. I think he's going to join the track team. So he doesn't get into trouble. He's really a good kid. He makes friends really easily, except for some neighborhood bullies that we had in Alabama that he kind of had a little bit of a run-in with them, which wasn't so great. But by and large, he's really just kind of naturally does the right thing. So I'm very proud of him. I'm a very proud mama. Typically, he's pretty talkative. He's a happy kid when he's at home. He likes to play the guitar. He loves Elvis. Oh my gosh, he does this impression you would not believe. And you know, he wants to be in the Army one day. That's something that he's talked about before. So that's kind of a little bit about my baby.
Wonderful, thank you. So now the process is we will have a classroom observation, which Ms. Balestino will give.
Okay. Forrest was observed earlier this month on April 10th during a 7th Bell mathematics class, and he was seated at the back with a shoulder partner at the adjacent desk. He took out his materials to begin the warm-up. He didn't understand how to complete 2 of the problems that were displayed up on the smartboard, but he since he didn't know what to do right away, he doodled on his page for a little bit, and then one of the teachers came over and redirected him, and after she walked away, he did return to doodling. He didn't have his homework completed from the night before, but he did pay attention during the review. There were some notes up on the board that he did write down the notes. They were a little bit difficult to read. He had written them in red pen, but he pulled the pen apart, and then again, the teacher came back and redirected him. He took a few minutes to find his review chart in his binder, but once he did, he got on task and he was able to complete the 3 problems. And he did raise his hand 5 times whenever the teacher was asking different questions, so he was called on twice and answered correctly. He is able to communicate with his teachers and his classmates without difficulty. He displayed an appropriate level of activity for the class and throughout the observation. His handwriting was legible for the most part, except for those the note-taking, and he could manipulate his school materials without difficulty. And finally, he interacted with his classmates appropriately.
Wonderful, thank you. Now, Ms. Dougherty, one thing I neglected to give you at the beginning of our meeting was our special ed parental rights and safeguards, which every parent gets once a year at the meeting. And if you have any questions about those parental rights or safeguards, we'd be glad to go over them with you.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome. So at this point, we'll go ahead and go with the psychologist report.
Okay, I'm going to read a summary of her report. This is from the testing that was recently done. Forrest was administered the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, 4th edition, And from this, his general cognitive ability was within the below average range of intellectual functioning as measured by his full scale IQ. His overall thinking and reasoning abilities exceeded those of about 4% of other children his age. He had a 70 on his full scale IQ. His ability to think with words is slightly more superior than his ability to reason without the use of words. His verbal reasoning abilities are low average range, and his nonverbal reasoning abilities are in the borderline to below average range. He also, his verbal comprehension abilities, they're in the low average range. He had a score of 87. His performance on the subtests that were on this comprehension and information knowledge were in the average range to his inferior abilities in the similarity subtest. Those were in the low average range. This suggests that his abilities are scattered. So because he had higher scores and lower scores, he had scattered abilities in that area. His knowledge of conventional social behavior is of average strength with a score at the average level. The subtest required him to provide oral solutions to everyday problems and explain the underlying reasons for certain social rules of concepts. His nonverbal reasoning abilities measured by the perceptual reasoning index are in the low average range. He had an 81 on that particular one, and his working memory had a 71 on that particular subtest. He had a relative weakness in mental control to make the process of complex information more time-consuming for Forrest. This drains his mental energies more quickly as compared to other children his age. He had a processing speed in the below average range, which was a score of 60. Then he was given the comprehensive test of phonological processing. So that assessed his phonological awareness. And on that particular test, he scored in the average range. And then on the one that he had to rapidly name certain things, he had the low average score on that particular one. So his score there was a 70. And then he had a Connors-Wells self-report, and on that one, he did not identify any significant problems in the area of family, emotions, conduct, or anger management. And then he had the achievement test, Woodcock-Johnson, 3rd edition, and he scored the following. In broad reading, his score was an 82, which is in the low average. His word letter identification was 69, so that was a significant decoding deficit. His reading fluency was a 68, that was in the below average range, and his comprehension was a 77. That is his strength in the area of reading. He does appear to have some, but not all, of the prerequisite phonological skills for reading, but is not yet automatic in his decoding skills. As far as his math score, overall, he had an 81. His calculation subtest was a 78, which was below average. His fluency was math fluency was an 83, which was below average, and that was solving simple addition and subtraction problems. And his applied problem solving score was 80, which is also in the below average. And then his written language score was a 71, and that was in the below average range. So overall, his skills are evenly distributed, although each area measured indicates that Forrest achieves in the below average range. And that is typical of a student in the elementary school. Miss Gump reported that he had been bullied in Alabama, just as you stated, and that you moved to Virginia because children bullied him. You also noted that he had academic problems, but you didn't feel that he made progress in elementary school, and that you also related weaknesses in processing speed. And the pattern of processing speed abilities lower than verbal comprehension ability is more common among students who are experiencing academic difficulties than those who are not. So that kind of goes over what the psychologists found.
Okay, and so at this point in our eligibility, what we determined is if Forrest needs specialized instruction for the general education curriculum. And in order to do that, we have to rule out 3 things. Whether he had adequate teaching in English and math, which I say he did. He's been in school since kindergarten. And if he is a ESL student, so if he was taught in a different language, which he was not. So I think we can rule all those environmental things out and say that Forrest definitely needs specialized instruction in order to bring his level of success to other children. So now what we do is determine which category he would fit in. And by the psychologist report, I think we could say we have 2 choices: intellectual disabilities and specific learning disability. So what we do is we go through each step of these worksheets to determine the best, or it could be both. So we'll start with the intellectual disability worksheet. The definition of an intellectual disability means he's significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning, existing concurrently with deficits in adaptive behavior and manifested during the developmental period that adversely affects a child's educational performance. Now, Forrest was found eligible at the age of 3 of having a disability. So we have to go to step 2, and all 3 areas have to be checked. Does he have significant intellectual functioning? He does. He is by the WISC. He's at a 70, which is borderline or below average. He has to have a significant impairment in one of these areas: conceptual skills, social skills, or practical skills. And he does in the language, which is the conceptual skills. He was an 87, which is below average range. And then he has a developmental history, which he was identified at age 3. And then it also has to have step 3. There's a documentation of adverse effect on the educational performance due to documented characteristics. He was in the self-contained setting, and his state testing scores are significantly lower than his peers. And due to the intellectual disability, the student needs specially designed instruction. Can we say that he meets all 4 of those steps?
Yes.
Yes, so intellectual disability. Now we have to rule out specific learning disability, or he could have both as a secondary condition. The definition of a specific learning disability means a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes in understanding and using language, spoken and written, that may manifest itself in the imperfect ability to listen, think, speak, read, write, spell, or do mathematical calculations. So then we go to step 2. The student does not achieve adequately for the student's age or to meet Virginia-approved grade level standards in one or more of the following areas. Well, he met these areas in math, written expression, reading, and basic reading skills. So we go to step 3, a processing disorder that impacts the student in the areas of mathematics, reading, written expression, and basic reading skills. So then we go to step 4. And in this step, it shows that if he has an intellectual disability, which we just determined he did, then he cannot have a specific learning disability. So we have to rule this disability out. So at this point, we find Forrest eligible for specially designed instruction under the category of intellectual disability. Do you have any questions? I know that's a lot to take in.
That is, I think Forrest is in good hands with the Virginia Public Education School System.
Now, we did note in the psychologist report that he does have some speech areas, and he does possibly need occupational therapy, but we can have our professionals evaluate him to incorporate those as services in his IEP at that time. So what we will do now is sign our eligibility paperwork, and the process is our team has 30 working days to develop the IEP, and then we'll come back together and present that with his accommodations and support.
Great.
Okay, wonderful. So at this point, we will sign the eligibility summary. You are the parent, you will sign there. concludes our eligibility meeting. Thank you very much, Ms. Bell.
Thank you.